I know something's gonna happen, but it's out of my hands.
You gotta have it up here to know how to start these things, and stop them, and start them again.
Canada-U.S. tariff dispute.
Well, Jessica realized the first thing she had to do was set Chris and the others free.
Canada-U.S. tariff dispute. So, Canada and the United States are fighting again. And this time, the price tag is getting rather difficult to ignore. President Trump's escalating trade feud has prompted Canada to impose 50% tariffs on roughly 20 billion Canadian dollars in U.S. goods. And Canada says its own dollar-for-dollar retaliation begins September 8th. Lovely. Nothing says close allies quite like making everything more expensive. The fallout is already becoming a political headache across the United States. Politicians from both parties, including some Republicans, are warning that these tariffs could raise costs for families and businesses, while damaging America's relationship with one of its closest allies. And, well, border states have rather a lot to lose. Michigan, Minnesota, Maine, Virginia. All depend heavily on trade with Canada. Washington State Senator Patty Murray put it rather bluntly. Canada is not the 51st state. She accused President Trump of owing Canada an apology for nearly 2 years of what she called boorish insults and jeers. And Washington has plenty of economic reason to care. Nearly 29% of its imports between April 2025 and March 2026 came from Canada. About $21 billion worth of goods. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer was equally unimpressed. She called the tariff fight another example of Washington Republicans' ongoing, chaotic tariff wars with Canada. And she warned that tariffs effectively act as a tax hike on Michigan families and businesses. So, yeah, you know what I think. You all know, all it's done for me is, well, yeah, it's just higher prices at the frickin' grocery store. Higher prices at the gas pump. That little detail tends to make trade policy feel rather more personal, doesn't it? Michigan imported approximately $55.5 billion in Canadian goods last year. And about 80% came from Ontario. So when Michigan politicians say this relationship matters, they aren't exactly being dramatic. Well, not only dramatic. Michigan Congresswoman Haley Stevens said the new tariffs would make life more expensive in a state whose relationship with Canada stretches back centuries. Her message? You don't rob your neighbor. And she wants the trade war to end. Another Michigan politician, Abdul El-Sayed, accused Trump of escalating the conflict for his own vanity. He claimed Canadian tariffs were already costing Michigan families an additional $3,200 a year. And warned, it's going to get much worse. Then there's New York Governor Kathy Hochul. Her assessment was considerably shorter. Trump, she said, was needlessly picking fights with our allies then raising prices here at home. Her conclusion? That's Trump's economic policy. In a nutshell. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer went further. He called Trump's trade wars chaotic, and said they were bleeding the American people dry. He argued that the dispute with Canada should have never gone into effect. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar also warned of higher costs for small businesses, farmers, and families. And Minnesota has an especially intimate relationship with Canada. It imports more than $19 billion worth of Canadian products every year. More than 2/3 of it. Energy. Crude oil. Natural gas. Electricity. So, yeah. Tariffs have consequences. Especially when the thing you're taxing is the thing you need. Maine is feeling the pressure, too. Governor Janet Mills warned that the latest escalation would further strain Maine's relationship with its closest trading partner. She said the state has had enough of this unending trade whiplash. And interestingly, Republican Senator Susan Collins agrees that the uncertainty is becoming a problem. Maine imports around $2 billion in non-petroleum products from Canada every year. Businesses, farmers, lobster fishers, all have concerns about tariffs, supply chains, and possible Canadian retaliation. Collins warned that if the tariffs proceed, businesses will have little choice but to pass those costs along. Which means higher prices for families. Again. Because apparently, that part keeps happening. Collins is calling for both countries to return to negotiations and reach what she describes as a fair agreement. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger also warned that the consequences could arrive within days. Canada is Virginia's #1 export destination. And she says the tariffs threaten families, farmers, producers, foresters, and businesses, while destabilizing relationships those industries depend on. Colorado Senator Brittany Petterson acknowledged Canada's retaliation, but warned about the long-term consequences for critical industries on both sides of the border. She described the president's approach as incompetent and unhinged. And then there was California Governor Gavin Newsom. Subtle? Not exactly. He pointed out that Canada is America's closest ally, a critical trading partner. And yet Trump is hitting it with 50% tariffs. Then he asked, what the actual F are we doing? Fair question. President Trump, meanwhile, remained relatively quiet until early Sunday morning. Then, on Truth Social, he argued that Canada wants the benefits of being a U.S. state, without actually becoming one. He also accused Canada of imposing massive tariffs on American farmers for years, and declared, no more. And so, here we are. Two countries that share the world's longest international border. Two deeply integrated economies. Two long-standing allies. Now exchanging tariffs, retaliation, and increasingly hostile rhetoric. The politicians warning about the consequences are not all Democrats. Some Republicans are sounding the alarm, too. And the central concern is remarkably simple. Tariffs may be imposed on another country, but eventually, someone at home pays the bill. Families, businesses, farmers, manufacturers, consumers, and perhaps, just perhaps, the relationship itself. Because when your closest trading partner is also your closest neighbor, starting a trade war can get rather expensive and rather awkward. Very awkward, actually. Especially when you still have to share the border.
Suddenly have disappeared.